Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Underrated Movies. I am your guy. I am your man, Mr. Alton Henry, and today I'd like to talk to you about another film that I believe is severely underrated. Doesn't get that too much attention. I believe it's now available on Netflix, and it is one hell of a good sci-fi action thriller. Today I'm going to talk about Looper, or I'm going to recommend Looper, starring Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Emily Blunt, and Bruce Willis. And this is a film about set in the future about a group of mafia-like assassins known as loopers, where they assassinate people from the future. But in the future, they send people that they want to assassinate into the past, and they eliminate them once they're sent there, like 30 years back in the past. And the film follows a fellow looper who sees himself sent back in time, but escapes escapes his execution. Now he's on the run from his own team members, from his own gang, to try to kill him. And then a lot of unpredictable things start to happen. Hope I sold you on the story. And the character's name, played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Bruce Willis, they play the same character, just different versions of themselves. Bruce Willis plays the older version. Joseph Gordon-Levitt plays the younger version of this character named Joe. And Joe pretty much has a routine down to himself where he pretty much is somewhat satisfied and settled with his life as a looper. Goes out partying, is praised by his boss, played by Jeff Daniels, who played a pretty good somewhat side antagonist. And, he has a girlfriend and he's pretty much settled out and somewhat enjoys his life to an extent until he finds out he has to close his loop, which his future self is sent back into the past to be killed, but it fails. And his future self escapes. Where Bruce Willis's character, and this is kind of the weirdest thing, and actually this is one of the best moments I found in any film ever. And this is a spoiler for anybody who hasn't seen it. Because there's a sequence in there where he gets, okay, let me go back. Let me explain a little bit about the whole world of this. Now, there's a term they use in the film called closing your loop, where a version of yourself from the future gets sent back into the past and you unknowingly shoot him, and then you see dozens of golden bricks strapped to him, and then when you kind of look at yourself, you look into the person and it's actually yourself, which means you have which means you're terminated. I mean, your contract has been terminated working for this organization. And then they basically give you 30 years to enjoy the rest of your life until some assassin nabs you, grabs you, and sends you back in the past, and it kind of does it all over again. Kind of like, closing off their, any ties to any government agencies, just so, I guess, in future or in other universes, which they don't really explore or explain. I'm just assuming that is, that, there's no loose ends. And unfortunately for Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, it doesn't succeed, where his older self escapes the execution and is on the run on a mission to find the people responsible for murdering his wife, who, later in the film he gets married. And the secrets I'm going to explain is where there's a version in a different timeline where he sees himself, closing his loop, where he kills his future self. And then you see into like a little montage of him from year 1 to 30 of him living his life, pretty much doing the same thing, and then losing money, and then going back, joining some sort of other criminal organization as an assassin, pretty much for the rest of his life. His life didn't turn out very well. And then until he meets and marries a beautiful woman and tries to settle and hopefully wanted to, have kids, and that fails when it's time for his loop to close. But he escapes it, goes back into the past, and hopefully prevent his wife from dying. And that's the older version of Bruce Willis's character, or the same character, Joe. That's his mission, to go back into the past and make sure his wife survives the encounter. When Joseph Gordon-Levitt into the next universe, he is on the run from his organization because the loop escaped, and now I forgot what the organization is called, but they're trying to kill both of them so they can try to keep it contained and under control. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt meets a woman played by Emily Blunt, who's out living out in the outskirts of the city on her own in the countryside, and they kind of form somewhat of a special relationship, which they're kind of a little bit at odds with trust and anything. And the more he spend times with her and tries to figure out what's going on with the overall story is, and which I actually liked. First off, when I saw the movie in theaters, I didn't really like it, but I couldn't stop thinking about it because they get you in this world. They built the world up around in the first half of the film, and to kind of explore what the loopers do, what their lives are like, and everything. Once Bruce Willis comes in, then the second half of the film completely goes in a different direction, where they briefly mention certain things early in the film, but they address it in a completely different direction, which I did not expect, and it was just balls out crazy. And it was bold. It was bold. I actually like it that it was different, and Rian Johnson, which I know who gets crapped on for The Last Jedi, does something completely different and unique with the time travel story. And it's really, hands down, I think so far his best movie, and just one of the best time travel films I've ever seen. And this is actually probably one of my favorite films, because I could not stop thinking about how it ends is unpredictable. And Bruce Willis gives one of his best performances in here, even though Joseph Gordon-Levitt's pretty much the main lead of the film, and he kind of gets sidelined a bit. But it's interesting that his character kind of becomes somewhat of an antagonist, protagonist, and it kind of debates a little bit, where he's a little bit more of an antagonist. That's a little of a spoiler, but it pans out beautifully. And then there's a telekinesis being who could be actually the boss of the whole Looper gang, which they mention it, and it's implied, or I won't say implied, but you kind of get the hint who the boss is, and it's great. Like it's phenomenal. Like it's like, it feels like an anime film. It feels like the plot and just the way it goes about it feels like an anime, and it's just so unique. It's so different from any film. It's like a neo noir modern science fiction western. I wouldn't say modern, but science fiction western action thriller. And it's really amazing how they're able to try to put prosthetics and make Joseph Gordon-Levitt look like Bruce Willis, and they pull it off a bit. But it worked for me. Just the emotional depth and what goes on in this film. Rian Johnson, you are a phenomenal filmmaker. And this, I think, is your best film. And I highly recommend it for anybody who wants a good sci-fi action film. Looper. And also, I like to celebrate Bruce Willis's career. Growing up watching his movies, he, was an inspiration for Unbreakable, Die Hard trilogy, The Kid, and so many others. Red, Pulp Fiction, and so on. And it's unfortunate, but understanding that he is retiring from acting due to some health issues, and I believe that's the best for him, and I wish him well for the duration of his time. And thank you, Bruce Willis. Thank you so much for being the role model of being our hero. and bringing us some very classic movies that we will endure and cherish for the rest of our time. Thank you, Bruce Willis. And I know that sounded very weird, I'm sorry. But again, thank you, Bruce Willis. But I highly recommend Looper. If you have seen it, let me know. Put down in the comment section if you have seen it. Like it, share it, and let me know what is your favorite underrated movie.